From Chicago, welcome to 3Degrees Discussions. I'm your host, Mike Vasquez. This is a podcast about the stories behind the innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders in the 3D printing industry.
It was just me here. So when I was going on booth, it was just me. And when I was looking at the other booth, well, it was mostly male, and the attendees were mostly male, and people on stage were mostly male. So I wouldn't recognize myself in any of those. And I saw a lot of engineers, and I was like, I'm not an engineer. So I started looking and taking points of everything that was putting me aside, being young, because we have to say, like, especially at the time, was mostly older people than me that were not 25, who were going to those shows, who all knew each other. I have to say, from someone who is new to the industry, it can feel a little bit intimidating. I know now that it's actually welcoming and that we're all friendly and a big family who loves each other, right?
That was Nora Toure. Nora is currently the Director of Sales and Service Factory Operations at Fast Radius. She's also the founder of Women in 3D Printing, which is one of the largest additive manufacturing communities in the world. She joins the show today to talk about her career journey from law school to the world of manufacturing and 3D printing. And we also discuss the importance of bringing diverse perspectives, expertise, and opinions into the AM sector. Welcome to the show. And as we start, could we just get a little bit of background on kind of where your career in additive started?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, thank you for having me on the show. I'm going to start there. I'm really excited. And again, thank you for the opportunity here. So my career in additive manufacturing started in 2010, so 10 years ago, back in Paris, France. And so I started with Sculpteo. Sculpteo is one of the leading service bureaus for additive manufacturing service bureaus out there. And so I joined as an intern. So I was a sales account manager, and was really hired to start and grow the business. So the company had already been around for, I think, almost a year, but I didn't really had a strong sales force. And so I joined to really kickstart this. So based from France, and at the time it was mostly for the French market, and then we of course grew out of the European market, and before we knew it, to the US market. But yeah, again, really started as an intern and then moved on and grew with the startup.
And was there any particular interest in 3D printing that you had that drew you to Sculpteo, or what?
Not at all. I had no idea what 3D printing was. I was freshly graduated. Not even like as I started as an intern, I was not yet graduating. That was actually the year I was graduating. And so my background is in law. I wanted to be a criminal lawyer, so I studied for that. I have a bachelor degree in law, and then I have a master degree in international business management. So I was actually in my last years of getting my master degree done. So I graduated actually while I was at Sculpteo. I know I had no idea what 3D printing was. I never even heard about it. So when I was looking for an internship, I had choices between a few. I think one was in pharmaceutical, another one in I don't remember what, and Sculpteo. And Sculpteo was the only startup out of those three opportunities. And so I remember having discussions with my family, because I was like, you know how it is, like the last year's internship is usually the one that will, get you propelled in your career, especially at least in France, that's how it works. And so you have to be really careful and cautious about which one you're picking. And so I was very tempted to go with some of the bigger names, because it would be nice on my resume, fresh out of school, like, people are looking at your experience, and like the bigger name, the better, right? And so this obscure startup in tech doing like, what, 3D printing? What is this thing? But still, like, I had a really good chat with Clément, the CEO, and I don't know, I felt like that was something appealing. I wanted to be part of that. And it's actually really when I saw the printer. I mean, I remember it was a Zco printer. That was upstairs. We had like a 2 or 3 stories office, even though we're a very small team, so we're basically one per floor. But anyway, on top of the building, there was the Zitco printer. And after I think we had over an hour of interview with Clément, and he was like, well, I'm telling you all of this about 3D printing, but are you actually interested in seeing the printer? I was like, hell yeah. And so we go up there, and that's, as soon as I saw it, I kind of understood a little bit of what Clément was telling me for an hour, because, again, I don't have a technical background. So he was going a little bit into the details. And for me, it's like, I have no idea what this guy is talking to me about. I don't understand this thing. And I certainly don't see a market for it. I just don't get it. And it's really when I saw the printer that I got it. I was like, okay, now I see. And so I think I signed probably a day later my contract, and that's really what got me into it. So it was a little bit of luck, gut feeling, and and falling in love with Zipcorp right away.
That's awesome. I like just the risk of taking the leap into the technology when you were kind of in law, going that direction, and seeing it and seeing the potential. That's really cool. And so as you started working with Sculpteo, what was the learning curve like as you talked to customers and learn about the technology? How were those initial conversations?
Yeah, well, there were interesting conversations because so 2010 customers didn't know about 3D printing yet, and also the markets we're going after was hobbyist, B2C. We didn't really knew, like the only other service bureaus out there were Shapeways, was really heavily focused on B2C already, even though now they're switching, but at the time it was really makers focused. And Fonoko, who was out of New Zealand, with also a presence in the US, but mostly heavy in the Oceania region. And that was more or less it. I mean, there was Immaterialized, who was actually, there was also Immaterialized, but we're not necessarily competing with them because they're going after a really designer kind of target. And so we're kind of searching ourselves, like who, where in this mix are we fitting? And so as we did this, well, I simply took I was doing cold calling all day, really trying to find who is the right customer. So I talked to so many different people who had no idea what 3D printing was. Good news is I didn't either. So we kind of went from there. So of course I couldn't tell that to them, but we had a great team who taught me so much. Each time I would hang up with a customer being like, okay, you know what? I'll come back to you. I'll find this for you. And then I would just run to the factory and ask all of my stupid questions to the production team, and they were just so patient with me. So that's really how I learned it all. It's really by learning with my customers and knowing that we can do, that we cannot do. And just because I was also generously interested in it, so I was basically trying to get as much information as I could. Went to conferences. We didn't have as many conferences as we have now. But all those I could find, I would go talk to people, getting really generously interested again in the technology. I learned everything I could about tolerances, material specifications, really all the questions that customer can ask, at every step of the process. Because the sales team, the way it was structured is that I would handle it all, from cold calling to customer support, if there were any customer support tickets involved. That was going through me. So I was really getting to know my customers, really from A to Z almost, and getting to know who they were, what they were doing, how they were using the parts. Biggest customers, of course, I would go and visit them. So it was a little bit I was treating them a little bit like family at some point. So I made it really my duty to know as much as I could about 3D printing to help them the best I could. So again, the learning curve was it was steep, but I had a lot of help from the team, and matter of fact, the fact that I was on site in the factory and being able to run there and talk to the to the production team, that was really, really helpful. And also the dev team, because of course, we're thinking actual production, but there is also everything up front and the 3D file. I didn't know anything again. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I've always found being able to see the printer and is super helpful in just understanding the technology. And then you get this kind of additional, really focused questions based on what your customers are asking, seeing a lot of different industries and what types of questions they're asking. So I imagine that was really, really valuable just to kind of focus your own learning and broaden across a lot of different technologies and seeing how they evolved and as companies got more interested in either prototyping or production.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually the funny thing here is, so as I said, we were kind of looking for a market. So we went through a heavy B2C kind of phase where we were doing figurines. Like probably you remember those times where everyone was having their own 3D printed figurines. We did it for weddings, for events, like name it, we've done it. And then we switched and we went to the B2B market because we realized that, really if we wanted to sustain as a business, like, let's face it, it's not by doing figurines. And so we switched to B2B. And so I had to more or less relearn everything I knew based on this new market and really getting more and more involved in what industry applications we could get into, what materials we would need for that. Like, did we have everything we need to do this? And so those were also very interesting times where I worked heavily with all of our departments to figure this out. And those were, again, really, really interesting times for me. This is also when I came to the US actually to open the US facility. So like everything was happening at the same time. So I would say like that was 2012, 2013. We had initiated a switch probably like already end of 2011. So we kind of realized pretty quickly that we needed to go into the B2B market, but we are still doing a lot of figurines. So, you don't transition, overnight. So it took a little bit of time, but we knew where we wanted to go. And that's really what mattered at this time. So yeah, that was another interesting learning curve.
How did you find it from a career jump from going from Europe to the US? Was there a lot of difference in terms of business culture or focus on the customers that you were starting to talk to?
Yeah. So way more than I thought there would be when I first said yes to coming to the US. So I jumped on the occasion. I think I said yes to Clément before even talking to my husband. And he was on board, luckily. But I was very, very excited to come to the US. But I didn't realize, I think, the amount of work that would be behind it. And hence, those were probably the best couple of years I had in my career so far. So that was like 2012, 2014. Those were times where it was basically just me in the office in San Francisco. We had a few hires, but it was mostly me leading. And I think I had more months. It was just me than when we had actually an intern with me. And I was literally working, so I was working in a co-working space in San Francisco, and I started with, with co-working space, you have different levels. So I had like a ping pong table seat where basically in the morning you come with your computer and just sit wherever you have some room. And those were at the time like ping pong tables in the co-working space. So literally I was doing all my cold calling and everything from ping pong tables in a co-working space. So a little bit annoying for everyone else around me, I guess. But at the same time, everyone was doing it more or less. And then I upgraded to having a closed office that was smaller than the restrooms of the building. But it was, again, I had my closed office. I was so happy. But anyway, that's not really answering your question. Those were more anecdotes. But no, the actual shifts, well, I had worked in France for 3 years. So I was already shaped a little bit to the European way of working. But I think one of my strengths, and I think that's what Clément and Marine, so Marine was our CMO at Sculpteo. So the two of them really are the reason why I was in the US and really they pushed me and got me where I am, really there. So this is a public thank you, I guess, to both Clément and Marine for all they gave me during this time. But anyway, I was not expecting there to be so many differences. So again, I was really shaped the French European way of working, but at the same time, I think I'm pretty good at adapting to new situations. So it's for sure the first few months were a bit rough. Like I had to learn not to be late to a meeting. Seems stupid and an anecdote, but I didn't know that in the US you're not late to a meeting. So I learned it the hard way, with customers not necessarily being too happy. And again, I was still young. I was less than 25. English wasn't. It's still not. I'm going to keep my French accent, I think, for for the remaining of the times. But at the time, it was even more heavy. So there were really hard things in the day to day, not really understanding where to start. This like symptom of having like a blank page almost. And okay, I'm here now. What do? I need to find customers. Like, who do I call? Like, it was basically starting fresh from what I had done in France. But in France, it was easier because I had a team there, and also because it was in French and I was a market and more or less knew, or at least I was able to discuss with the team from day to day. And right now, it was like in the US, it was very different. Like 3 p.m. in San Francisco, it's midnight in France. So I didn't had there was like a good chunk of my day where I was like, what am I doing now? Like, who do I call? What do I tell them? Like, so I had to be really sure of my competencies, and so that built definitely confidence. I had to, but in terms of cultural differences, I guess I learned how to deal with it, and now I've worked more in the US and I've worked in France. So I think I would have had a hard time going back to France. But I think like where I saw the most the cultural difference is when we hired our team and we built the factory. So that was around 2014. So it had been 2 years already. I had been in the US, like building the market. It's only once we saw that we had a market, that we had recurring customers, that are actually making sense to build a factory on site. So that's when we went in and hired the team. And then I was, over time, I managed the team. And so that's when I learned to be a manager. So that was already first thing, like I had to learn how to, being a manager. And the second aspect of it is like my management was French in France, and my team was American, Silicon Valley, really. And so the expectations were different on both sides. I mean, I had people during interviews asking me if you had yoga classes. I was like, we're not set up to have yoga classes. And someone in France is like doing an interview asking if there's like yoga classes. I mean, everyone is gonna laugh. You're not even gonna ask for it. This is the kind of cultural difference I'm talking about here. There was like just different kind of expectation, and I had also to manage the expectation from my managers back in France. Like the salaries are not the same, especially when you're hiring the San Francisco region. I mean, it's not the same. Like, of course, the operator you're going to hire in San Francisco is paid probably 3 times the rate of someone in France. It's just not the same market, and that takes time, to have both team understanding that, because you're all in the same company, and it doesn't always make sense to have such differences. So definitely cultural differences, but I learned to embrace them, and I learned from them. I think I made mistakes along the way, that's for sure. Still doing mistakes, I'm sure of it. And I still have some of my French management. So I'm sure my team at Fast Traders now will tell you that. I mean, it made me who I am now, both cultures actually.
And it was around that 2014 timeframe that you also started the Women in 3D Printing
Absolutely.
group. Is that right?
Yep, exactly 2014. I guess it was a really busy year for me inside. That's exactly right. But I started small, so it wasn't as big as it is now, obviously. It was a blog, and I had never done any blog before. That's not true. I'm retracting this. I had started a blog about my journey in the US. That was very low key, almost just for my family kind of blog, because I was, trying to get into writing. Like, I love writing in French. Writing in English is, of course, a different story for me, and I wanted to try it. And of course, those were again like really low key blogs. I don't think they even like. I hope they're not live. Otherwise, someone could find them. So I'm going to make sure they're not live anymore. That I kill them, because it's a little bit embarrassing, actually. But Women 3D Printing was the real first blog I started, with the idea really of sharing the stories of the women in the industry. And the reason why I did it in 2014 is because those 2 years, as I said, were really key moments in my career, but also in my personal life. I mean, my husband was with me. We were not married at the time, but it was just the two of us here. My family is still, I mean, we have a son now here, so the three of us now, but at the time it was just the two of us, and all our families back in France. And the first 6 months in the US, I did it just by myself. My husband was able to join me only later. So there were some times where it was definitely lonely, and I had to build my network, and that was hard. You know, I had a more or less strong network in France, and even though now when I think about it and compare today's network, it had nothing to do with what I have today. And also the industry wasn't the same as it is today, so that's also the reason why. But still, there were like very lonely moments, and I realized back then that yes, I was a female in a male-dominated industry, and that's not something that really hit me before when I was in France. I'm not saying France is any better than the US. What I'm saying is that I had a team to protect me from that. So when we would go to shows, it wasn't just me on the booth representing the company. We had three of us. And most of the time, actually, now I realize it was either like two female, one male, or it was pretty well balanced. The team at Sculpto has always been pretty well balanced, actually. So that's definitely not something I had witnessed before. It's only really coming to the US again because it was just me here. So when I was going on booth, it was just me. And when I was looking at the other booth, well, it was mostly male, and the attendees were mostly male, and people on stage were mostly male. So I wouldn't recognize myself in any of those. And I saw a lot of engineers, and I was like, I'm not an engineer. So I started looking and taking points of everything that was putting me aside, being young, because we have to say, like, especially at the time, where it's mostly older people than me that were not 25 who were going to those shows, who all knew each other. I have to say, from someone who is new to the industry, it can feel a little bit intimidating. I know now that it's actually welcoming and that we're all friendly and a big family who loves each other, right? But at the time, when you were coming from the outside, everyone knows each other. That's the thing. Everyone knows each other. Everyone is friendly with one another, and it's not always easy to get in. It takes a lot of guts to just go in. Like, for example, I remember going to my first AMUG, and it was just me, and didn't know anyone, and everyone knew each other. And I was like, how am I going to make friends with those guys? They all seem to be older than me. I don't have anything in common. I don't have the codes. I remember listening to a group who was talking about, I don't know what game that was a sport that might be like football or baseball. I still don't know. We have like a field here. I don't even know what sport they're doing in there. You see, that's not my thing. But I didn't have the codes, and it's so hard to get in when you don't have the codes. I had to trust my English that I don't trust all the time. I wasn't necessarily confident, and I started talking to people I was starting to have in my network, because I'm saying all of this, but at the same point I was still able to build some sort of a network, talking to other people in Silicon Valley, other service bureaus. I remember having great chat with some women at Fathom Studio, who of course were competing with us, but still we're having chats because we're doing the same thing every day. So it was always nice to still get to know each other. So I've never had any problem talking to everyone in the industry. It's not because we're in a competing company now that we cannot talk. So I started talking to them, sharing a little bit about my experiences, not always feeling comfortable with everyone and everything in the industry. And I realized that for most of them, it was more or less the same thing. We're like, yeah, I know, I had this meeting where I was just the only female. Really, it sucks. And I was like, yeah, me too. And the more I talked, so at the time I had like 20 women in my network, and I thought that was it, that there were no more other women in the entire industry. So pretty naive. But I figured, we all have very interesting backgrounds, because that's the other thing too, is that I told you a little bit about my background, that I'm coming from criminal law originally, then did business degree, but I'm not an engineer, and everything I know I've known from doing it. And so I've realized that a lot of people, and not only women here, but a lot of people in the industry are more or less the same. They're coming from different industries. And to me, that's really what makes this industry so interesting and so diverse, and why it should be even more diverse. I'm saying diverse in terms of background and thoughts, more or less, but not necessarily again in terms of gender, and even less in terms of ethnic groups and the represented minorities. That's for sure. We have a lot of work to do on that. But still, in terms of background, it is more or less diverse, probably more than other industries. And so I wanted to share the stories of the women specifically, showing that either like to both people from the industry, men and women, who are the women in the 3D printing industry, who we are, where we're coming from, why we're here, what we do with the technology. And my second goal here was to encourage more women from the outside to come in and feel welcome, and being like reading a story about a woman in Additive and being like, oh, I relate to that. I have the kind, more or less the same background. She's doing this. This is super cool. That's interesting to me. I had this idea I want to use 3D printing for. Let's do this. And so that was really my original goal. So yeah, and I started this again as a low-key blog in 2014. I think my very first interview was from, oh gosh, I'm going to blank on the name now. This is embarrassing. She was one of our customers at Sculpto. I think I interviewed quite a lot of our customers actually at Sculpto, along with a few women from competing companies.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And now you're up to, I mean, I think you're hosting conferences. There's events weekly that I see on LinkedIn, and do a lot of work with America Makes and all the different trade shows and everything like that. So it's, I certainly have seen a lot of the growth of it, and excited about having all the diverse perspectives and stories, and hearing about how people have challenge some of the status quo in the space. So that's great. And as you've kind of grown the group, as you've learned more about other stories, is there kind of a consistent learning or support network that you see as something that could really help kind of propel even more women to be in the space? Is there something in particular that is really out there that companies and organizations aren't doing right now to spread that message?
That's an excellent question. I think we're not there yet, if I'm fully honest. So, and there are a few reasons for that, but I mean, more and more companies are, definitely looking into how they can have more diverse workforce. I think most companies now have this understanding that the more diverse your teams are, and the better for your business. This is really, so I think almost all companies have integrated that. Then actually putting it in action is hard. It's really hard, especially if you're already in this phase where you have, 20 something employees. Actually, no, I would say starting from 50 employees, it's really hard, because if you have a lot of white males in your workforce, it's hard, because you're going to have a hard time hiring more diversity, period. It's going to be hard because the culture of your company is not oriented to have diversity, and the diverse force might have a hard time joining your team. I remember, I'm not going to put some names here, but oops, sorry. But I remember interviewing for a company who had, there were actually about 25 employees, all white male. There was, I think, one woman in the team. And as interesting as the job was, the company was, everything was attractive to the company besides this diversity aspect. That was already important for me at the time. And so I declined for that reason, just for that reason, actually. And so, and I'm not the only one who reacts like this. So for me, it was important as the founder of Women 3D Printing, to not join a team that was only male, because that was a problem for me, because that was going against everything I was trying to do. At the same point, I could have had the opposite reflection and been like, I'll be the first, I'll be the second in this case, and we'll change that. But I was interested in doing this at this time. And the second aspect is that I didn't know if I were going to fit. So I was like, okay, that's going to be really hard. I remember, again, the small talk about sport that I don't even understand. I was like, that's going to be like this all day. What am I going to do in there? And so yeah. So again, and that I think is starting from like companies of a certain size is harder and harder. So, and And of course, in larger companies, they don't have this problem. They have more diverse workforces, but then it depends. Like then it's department by department, and most of the time, the engineering department are still very male dominated. It can be hard to hire female engineers. And there is also a pipeline issue. I keep hearing companies saying, like when I'm asking them about that, why don't you have more women in your team? They're like, well, we just don't find them. They just don't apply when. It's not that they don't find them, because they don't always look actively for them. But a lot of companies are expecting to put a job description out there, and you basically don't have time to do more than that, and you just then go through everyone who applied, and it happens to not be a lot of women who are applying. And then there might be an issue of like, how is a job description drafted? Where was it posted? So all of those are questions that in the day-to-day you don't necessarily have a lot of time to resolve. Like, okay, we needed to hire yesterday, let's put the job description out and we'll just get the best candidate. But again, if you don't have that many women applying, or people of color, well, you're just going to go with the pool of talents you have who already applied. And so that's why we have a job board, to try to to bring in more visibility to those jobs that are out there, to the women who we know are 90% of our audience on the blog, at least, because the overall, like, to our events is different. Actually, you have about 30% of men coming to our events, but the audience on the blog is a little bit different. So anyway, so yeah, there is an issue that we're not the only industry to face. This is true throughout all of manufacturing and all of tech. It happens that's where the course would have both. So I think we're just a conjunction of all of the issues that the other industries are seeing in that regard. So yeah, I would say the best timing to try to have diverse workforce is really at the beginning. That should be part of your DNA as a company, as a startup. And I actually think, like, for me, it's a really good sign when I'm seeing diverse teams on the startup level, because that means they have diversity of thoughts, diversity of point of view, diversity of background and knowledge and skill set. And for me, those are the teams who are going to go the long way. So I'm very careful at, when I'm watching the makeup of the workforce in a startup. If it's only white males, I doubt it's going to go far away, and not because they're not smart, just because they're missing, I think, some of the diversity of thoughts that are required to be agile and to be innovative.
Right. And I suppose one of the advantages of 3D printing, from, if I put myself in a company's perspective, a potential message could be you have a diverse pool of talent out ready, kind of looking for work, but at the same time, the industry itself and the number of jobs related to it, there's a whole host of things of ways to interact with the industry. It's not just engineers, it's software, it's materials, it's sales and business and all of that. So I think that's always what has been really exciting for me in being part of the space, is that you have you're kind of intermixing all these different pieces of the technology to either build businesses or build an application. And so I think companies thinking about it in that way can often engage more diverse workforces and pools, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm totally agreed. This is back to the diversity of backgrounds we have in this industry. I think we're in a unique position, from being, again, at the crossroads of both I was going to say marketing, but yeah, marketing is important, but of manufacturing and technology, and also the fact that we're a tool, we're manufacturing tools, and so what really the users are coming from different industries themselves, and so again, I think that's really makes it so interesting as well to me, is the fact that we have a lot of diversity in the kind of people and users we have for the technology.
And so for people that are maybe younger in their career, just out of university or in university, what advice would you give them as they start in their career path? Something that perhaps you would have liked to know as you started out and kind of made that jump into Sculpteo and the rest of your career?
Well, I would say be ready to be flexible. I think we're still a young, both technology. I mean, how is it, like 36 years old? It's not so old. So young technology, definitely even younger industry, who's still more or less searching for itself and searching for the next bright and great idea. We still have a few companies who are in the B2C market, but most of it is actually on the B2B market, and focusing more and more into heavy industry. And so I would say be ready for the market to shift again, and to see, depending on what company you're starting with, and what role you're starting with. Don't settle. Move on. Read the news outside of the industry. See how 3D printing can be used in those other industries we're not yet there. Because this is the kind of people we need. People who are ready to learn, not settling. Being ready to go outside of their comfort zone. And again, whatever role we're talking about, right? Engineering, marketing, business. Developers. That's true for everyone in our industry. We need to continue pushing the barriers here. We have to, if we want to, because again, let's face it, we're a manufacturing tool. We're building a piece of plastics and piece of metals. So we need to innovate if we want to continue our journey and continue growing, and continue expanding the customer base and user base we have in the industry. Would it be by better materials, better technologies overall, better use case, better business cases, being able to sell better software? So we need all of that, right, happening like now. So and for that, again, I think it takes people who are ready to learn, again, go outside of their comfort zone, and embracing that, and generously willing to do that. So, and again, I would say think of also additive manufacturing not as a silo from other manufacturing processes, more traditional manufacturing processes. I think they all work hand to hand and together. And I would love to see more of that. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I joined Fast Radius, because I'm genuinely convinced that they have the right answer by not doing only additive manufacturing, but also caster-retain, CNC, injection molding. I think that this is the right answer to what the future holds for 3D printing, is to be, again, back into the game of being into manufacturing. I think we've treated additive manufacturing a little bit too into a silo for too long. So again, that's another advice, just to keep in mind the big picture here, and what additive manufacturing is, and it's a manufacturing tool. So yeah.
Awesome. And we'll be posting the link to Women 3D Printing Fast Radius as well. But if people are interested in any of your events or the blog or any of the other content that you guys are putting out, where would you point them?
Yeah, simply www.womeninthree-dprinting.com. That's where you'll find everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I really enjoyed the conversation and learned a lot.
Same here. Thank you, Mike.